Hey.
Good afternoon.
What's going on? I need to check if the feed is actually going. I see your little linkage thing, Jesse, but I'm not sure about ours. Let me check over on the side. But welcome. Hopefully we're streaming. Jesse, why don't you start the intros here?
Yeah. It's Team Tim Live, obviously down one member. Tim Golden is out at Right of Boom, and he was going to join us, but he cracked a tooth, from what I was told. That's
in
now
Vegas.
Now that you're turning
Vegas,
40.
What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, I guess.
Wasn't that now that you're in The Hangover? Yeah. Something with a tooth.
Mike Tyson, baby. Now that you're turning 40, Roddy, you're going to have all sorts of those types of things happen. You'll be breaking tooths, breaking knees, breaking hips. It's on its way.
You start thinking less about fun things to do on the weekend and more about how much medical bills you're going to incur when you go roller skating with your daughters.
Yes.
So you just make sure you look at your life insurance policy, you look at your insurance policy, and you go, I think I can have fun this weekend.
I found out the hard way about 2 or 3 years ago that I should not be in the trampoline arena at trampoline parks because I walked away with a broken toe.
Have you ever, when you walk in, you got to sign that liability waiver. Have you ever read that thing? It's like you ain't got a lot of recourse if you snap an ankle.
You got to make that thing as strong as you can, right? Oh. It's got to be like no fault there, yeah.
Like you just stop for a second and look around and see how many kids are limping at any given time in those trampoline parks. You're like, I'm not young enough to do this.
Yeah. The problem is you incrementally, it's like the frog in the pot. You get in there and you're like a little, you're just kind of hopping around, then you try something, and before you know it, you're trying backflips thinking you're 22 years old again, and that's what happens.
Yeah, you try to do a slam dunk on the trampoline, basketball goal. Next thing you know, you're like you're waking up and the EMT's like trying to load you into the ambulance, and that's the story of that's what happens, right? You get old.
I think there's a cyber metaphor in there somewhere, but I'm not quite grasping it.
Something about like if you try to sprint and you're over 40, like something's gonna break, right?
I think we could tie
hamstring, ankle, knee, Achilles, something's gonna go.
Yeah, we could definitely tie going to the trampoline park into risk management. We could segue directly into that, right?
Lack of it's just like most of the businesses we know are uninsurable, right? Like tram parks there. Roddy, tell us a little bit about yourself. You hopped around over the last couple of years. Obviously a bit popular face in the channel, but go ahead.
So Roddy Bergeron, I am the cybersecurity technical fellow at SureWeb. So my role right now is to engage with the community and work with our partners and other MSPs on building out a better cybersecurity offering, platform, governance, risk management, the whole shebang. Before that, I was at Galactic Advisors working with their team on their compliance packages and their pen test as a service and automated pen testing solutions. And then before that, I spent 7 years in the MSP space. Worked for an MSP here in South Louisiana. They were a break fix shop whenever I started, and I was tasked with building out their recurring revenue model. So we built a managed service model, a cybersecurity model, VCIO and compliance as a service platforms or models for them. We tripled revenue there. Didn't add any staff.
Wow,
turned that place around. Like, it was a lot of work. It wasn't fun. I look back on it fondly now of we had some great times building that place up. But if you told me right now, like, hey, Rod, you want to go to a break fix shop and build it back up, I'd probably be like, I'll consult with you on it, but I don't think I have the youth anymore to take on those challenges. But again, like where my best strengths are at is taking lessons learned from those years, and taking lessons learned from other MSPs and some of the work I've done with other MSPs, and applying that to the industry as a whole. Because I mean, as you've heard other security practitioners say, like we need to raise the tides, and we need to do a better job of how we position ourselves and offer solutions and offer risk management solutions to our clients. And that's what I am. And before all that, before I was in the IT space, I was in government auditing. So I worked for an auditing firm doing government audits. I did government entities, but also banks and hospitals. And then I worked with a nonprofit before that as a transition team, helping them with some state privatizations. So I was having an IT side and a financial side. Was able to put the two together and do some really good integration in terms of facilities around for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. I spent 7 years doing that. So it was a very diverse career, but it's led me here talking with Tim and Jesse. So.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, I've bounced around. I think I'm on a third or fourth, certainly career. I mean, like it's a totally different industry. Jesse has been done a lot of things as well. You know, we're all kind of the same age. You know, a decade of career, right?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I think because those people ask a lot of times, you know, I think these days getting into cyber is a little bit more of a trajectory. You can select that. But people ask, how did you get into cybersecurity? And I go, it was kind of like a tumble down the stairs. I couldn't really tell you how it happened, right?
One day I was eating breakfast and it's like, congratulations, you're a CISO. And it's like, okay, all right, what do I do? What do I do now? Right? Like I got the title. Do I have to do any extra work?
That's a lot of extra work.
Yeah. And what started was like how I got into it was, I was in charge of operations. I was the COO. And as we were maturing processes, we were adding like, hey, we gotta do a better job of protecting the process, right? Because it's not just about outcome; it's about the pre-work and the safeguards you put in place to make sure you have a safe outcome, not just any outcome. And then so I naturally just fell into the role over the years. I realized you're talking with other practitioners out there that there's a growing need for security services out. So we were really early adopters into. Like, hey, we should be applying a framework to the work we're doing. Right? We can't just fly by the seat of our pants and just people. I always take the position of I'm the dumbest person ever in existence, and like smarter people than me have gotten in a room and created frameworks, and they work, and like we got to do something, and started adopting and applying frameworks to the work we were doing, and realized that and me not being real part of the MSP community, I was like, we're behind, right? We're behind in doing this. And then as I started digging more and getting more involved, I was like, man, we're really forefront way back when in 2017, 2016, like in adopting frameworks as part of our core process and as part of our core like methodology and what we did.
Yeah. So this runs the title today was Conveying Security's Value, and Jesse, Tim, and I had something in IT Nation, really metrics that matter to business owners, right? Non-technical business owners. I think, as you said, like, how do we all fall into cybersecurity? Like, we had some other career, and I think we've obviously pulled some experiences, pulled some strategies even on how to deal and how to sell cybersecurity to non-technical check writer. I actually worked at Big Four. I was in intellectual property doing that strategy, and there just wasn't enough work to go around. Then I was doing project management, and I got put on a cyber analytics, basically SIM development, right? So it was like trial by fire.
Why not?
SDLC, cybersecurity, RSyslog, Elastic Stack, you name it. So that was kind of like, you fall into it, right? And then next thing you know, here we are. There's double-digit growth every year, right? So, and I don't know when I don't see it stopping anytime soon. Yeah. So it's not surprising that more people are kind of being pulled into security. But as I just said, I think there's a lot of experiences, insights you gain just from working with people. Roddy, it sounded like you were working, in several areas like audit, right? Like, how do you you can't audit someone, without talking to them. So I think there's a lot to be gained by that. Jesse, what do you? talk a little bit about your career before MSP and really kind of the way you're helping MSPs build VC. So.
Well, yeah, it's interesting, Roddy. I resonated with what you were saying because I came from an operations background myself, and I worked in carrier service operations for the first 8 years of my career doing a combination of low voltage electrician work and Cisco command line work, right? So we're building out central offices and data centers and then turning up equipment, installing it, and turning it over to engineering. So, but this is at a massive scale in preparation or while the internet boom, the .com bubble was going on, right? So there was too much work to be done, but then the .com bubble burst and there was no work to go around, right? So that's when I went, and I'd grown to love the Cisco command line at that time. So that's how I got into MSP world. I went to DeVry, got my Cisco networking degree, and then went to go work for a startup MSP who was transitioning from a break-fix PBX VAR to an MSP, and got a chance to take those enterprise level operations blueprints and apply them to the MSP model. And so, after building cybersecurity stack and all that stuff you talked about, is very similar. I kind of put my head up and I said, "What the heck are we doing as an industry?"
It's like you go to, it's like you get in the plane. And you're like, you're going to go skydiving. You get in the plane, you get up to altitude, and the light turns from red to green and jump out, and you look around and you go, "Where's my parachute?" There's no, a lot of times it's all execution and no plan is what I'm seeing a lot out there. Right? It's a lot of tools. Right? We see this a lot. You go to a conference and you get shiny tool syndrome, and you get happy, and you keep throwing tools at your stack, and you forget the fact sometimes that there's people and there's process and there's policies and there's a whole other side to what you do, and we tend to ignore that in terms of technical. And that's where, Tim, to your point, that's where you lose your buy-in, because you forget that a business doesn't run just on tools. It runs on workflows, and it works on outcomes, and it works on objectives, and it works with people and finance and money. And you can't just keep throwing tools, aka money, at something and expect them to understand why, unless you tie that to business outcomes. And that was a hard lesson for me to learn in the MSP space, as we go to these attorneys, and because we were mostly legal and insurance, right? The two sexiest verticals out there, and we go talk to an attorney and start talking about, or go talk to an insurance agent, start talking about risk, and just talk about tools with them. And you're not speaking their language, and you immediately turned off, right? And attorneys don't care. Attorneys care about outcomes, and they care about liability. They don't care so much about, you use, like Cisco. They don't care the name on the equipment, right? For the most part, you may have a few out there, but the problem we run into is we start talking tech, and they don't care, because there's nothing tied to their business or them personally. And that was a hard lesson for me, because I'd walk in and be like, "Guys, guess what we're gonna do? We're gonna install the latest and greatest Sophos antivirus," and immediately it's just done. They're like, "Nerd, stop talking, nerd."
Or last time you told me to do that, it took me 5 more minutes longer to log in every time, or something. Don't bring that in here.
And we're and to your point, right? It's about conveying what the outcomes are going to be. You tell them you're going to install a new tool, and they're like, "Well, last time we did this, our computers didn't work for a week," right? And so again, you got to have outcomes tied to what you want to do, and not just, hey, latest and greatest, shiniest new tool from so and so. And I'm picking on Sophos. We were a Sophos shop at our MSP side. Nothing wrong about Sophos. We loved them. I don't want to sit here and act like something's wrong with them. But look, they don't care. They care about outcomes. They don't care about most people don't care about which brand pencil they use to write notes down with. They may care if it's a number 2, or whatever, but they don't care if it's the brand name. They just care about the outcome, right, and what they intend to do with it.
That was a lot of the theme. We've had Empath, Alex, Wes.
Well, I think that's right. And go ahead, Tim.
No, I mean, a lot of that is how does your business work? What kind of problems are you running into, right? What keeps you up at night? are you ever worried about like system? Have any of your like peers or friends or competitors like been in some kind of incident? It's got to be something. There's got to be some angle that's like relatable. So
the conversation has to be about them and not about you and what you're gonna do. Because like if you come, like, look, and we all use the analogy about the doctor. If I go to my doctor and I walk in, my doctor's like, here you go, here's some speed. You look like you need some ADHD medicine. I'm like, no, doc, I came in here because like I have a headache. Like you'd look at them like they were crazy, but like that's how we sold in the MSP industry for a while.
Right.
We'd walk in and be like, here's what you need, but we never explained the why of the need. And again, like going back to the doctor's going to look at you. He's going to say, okay, what's going on? He's going to make the conversation about you. You don't go to the doctor and the doctor starts talking about himself the whole time, right? Like I'd be like, no, I'm going to get a new doctor. But that's what we do in the MSP space. I find is we talk about ourselves and our response times and everything else.
Yeah, Roddy, talk about a little bit about the difference.
Well, I'll tell you what, it's interesting that we're talking about this right now because.
Am I freezing?
No, I think we have a delay from Jesse.
It's Jesse lagging. I thought it was me.
Yeah, I think that's me. Yeah.
Oh, good. I used to have fantastic Wi-Fi down here, and my father-in-law put a mesh router in, and now it's like a nightmare. But
Hey, Tim, what were you going to say?
Yeah, I was going to say, talk about a little bit selling cybersecurity and like Galactic. I think it's a little bit of a mystery. We like to keep things product agnostic, but what are some of the, I guess, maybe unique approaches, as a product, right? Like Galactic's not you mentioned a little bit of a SaaS tool for automatic pen testing. And how would that help, I guess? Like, how would you explain a pen test to a non-technical business owner, right? And like, what the hell you're doing?
Yeah, I mean, we wouldn't. Like, I'm not gonna to a non-technical person. I mean, we like so.
Yeah, you're dealing with like the
we dealt with MSP, we dealt with technical people, but like when we would go to sell this, I wouldn't tell them. I'd just be like, hey, do you have any requirements, or business objectives or contractual requirements? And we would go through it. So like the biggest one for us with a client or potential client is say, hey, do you have any regulatory needs? Like what industry, and then do you have that? And then the other thing would be like, hey, do you enter into a contract with other businesses that require you to meet certain standards? Like 70% of the clients we would talk to would be like, yeah, but we follow all the security items, and you pull those and start looking through it. It would require things like regular pen testing, vulnerability scans, risk assessments done on a regular basis, like not so much technical things like installing endpoint software and everything else, but actual big ticket items that a lot of times businesses don't think about. So the conversation would just be around like, hey, you want to keep this contract. We want to make sure if something bad does happen that we cover all our bases here, and that we make sure that you stay in business. And then we would tie that down to business outcomes. Like, hey, do you want to grow this relationship with this partner? We can. Or hey, if we ever do have an incident here, what do we do? Like, let's talk about the other side of this. Like, do you feel like your contracts would be in jeopardy if something bad were to happen here? Because we all know in the industry side, it's not like if something's going to happen, it's more likely when something's going to happen. And we would tie that back to business outcomes. Like, how much is this client, part of your revenue each year? We had one law firm in Washington, they did work with Walmart. Walmart was 32% of their revenue every year, and they were following 5% of their cybersecurity requirements with them. So I said, if they ever come in and audit,
wow,
like you sign off you've been signing off this for 10 years or whatever now. You're following these cyber requirements from your vendor, and you're transferring data. Like, have they done an audit? No. I was like, so if something bad happens, do you have to report it? I don't know. And I was like, well, it's many things that you have to do, things that you look into. So we talked about it, and I just told them like, hey, like, you're an attorney, you understand, like, if you violate a contract, the outcomes of that, right? Like, are you willing for us to propose? How do we get you in alignment with Walmart's requirements? And he's like, sure. So we gave him all the requirements. We gave him a price. We talked through it. He was like, man, it's kind of expensive. I don't understand. 7 months later, they got a letter in the mail from Walmart that Walmart was going to start doing audits through Cyber GRX. And they were like, hey, remember that proposal? Now it's time to go. And I was like, good. I'm glad we did a pre-assessment. We knew what had to happen. We knew the requirements. We didn't have to go through this process because like Walmart wanted something in within 90 days. Like we had to go test to 160, 170 different controls that they wanted to see that we'd put in place. It's like, cool, we have a plan. We have all this going on. So let's go. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, you've got a hook, right? Like in terms of business outcomes and
like everybody's got a business outcome.
32% of their business is about to be
at jeopardy, right? Like at jeopardy with just this one action. And then you tie that into the rest of the day. Like, hey, you got tons of clients. Like we want to make sure you understand that they're well protected because we don't want like, look, we're not going to sit there and tell you you're going to be breached. Like I never say that to a client, but it's like, hey, look, let's walk through the scenario of what would happen if something bad were to happen and how would that affect your business? And let's start from there. And it's usually a good conversation to have. And then you tie that into some kind of risk management we would do like through our offerings, like our VCIO offerings or our governance offerings. We start going through that. Like, let's talk about risk management. You give them a little taste of it and you make the whole conversation about them. It's never about your tools or anything else. Like you use it as a, hey, here's where we're at. Here's where we want to go. Here's how we can be better. How we can help protect the bottom line, right? Because that's what cybersecurity should be sold as. It should be as a financial protector, not as a financial burden to a company. And then you start the conversation from there.
Yeah. Well, I think that third-party risk management, you said, as you said, they're like, well, where's your SOC 2 or whatever they were going to do to kind of put the pressure on.
Yeah.
I wish that would get out more, companies talking to other companies like someone's going to come ask you to do this anyway. So why don't you just invest in cybersecurity anyway?
Yeah.
Right. If you're going to have to evidence it, why not actually do it?
Yeah.
And you're going to have to dance at some point. You're like, you might as well learn a couple moves. Right?
Yeah. And look, I can tell you, like, I've walked into incident response before scenarios where like we get a call. So we did work with attorneys. They would call us and be like, hey, we got a client that's having some ransomware issues. Can you look into it? And like every single one, like the first thing we do is say, get your attorney, get your insurance person, get your finance person on the phone with you. Like, let's have a conversation. And then next thing I want to do is like, when's the last time, your risk officer or your legal team reviewed your contracts for requirements? Have we do we need to notice anybody, right? Or do we need to, or what's going on? And like a lot of times they had blatantly signed off on contracts saying they were doing certain security precautions and weren't. And I was like, all right, now you got to go have a conversation with this company. And like I can tell you, Garmin, Airbus, Rolls Royce, Nike, you name it. Like I've been like, you gotta get on the phone with those guys and tell them what's going on, right? Because these are, they have strict requirements about how you handle their intellectual property. And I'm not your attorney, but I'm gonna tell you, like your attorney's probably gonna tell you, you've done a poor job of handling this. Now you gotta go tell somebody you poorly handled the data you said you were gonna handle correctly. And like I took those life lessons, like those lessons done through that work, and just tried to apply it to the practice of like, hey, I'm gonna tell you a story, right? And we go through the storytelling process. Like this happened to this business. They're right around the corner from you, and you never heard about it, but it happened. And they were down. I think one business outside, they were down for a month while the insurance company did forensics and everything else, and got a team on site. So like, is that something you could potentially survive if you had to shut down the business for a month while the pieces got put back together, right? Like, let's talk about that. Let's talk about how that's going to affect business and your survivability as a business, right? Because that's at the end of the day, that's what it's about. It's not about putting tools in place. It's about the business continuing and surviving and employing people and making sure those employees take home a salary at the end of the day and they pay their mortgages and send their kids to school and put food on the table, right? Like that's what matters. And that's all disrupted whenever there's an incident or a breach that's that bad.
Just pulling back, Jesse. It's interesting, right? Because Roddy's capacity at Galactic, it almost I think it aligns a little bit with your working with MSPs to build the vCISO program, right? So, anything I think we've seen your posts on LinkedIn. You talk a lot about. You talk about really ICP, right? Like, which I think aligns with this conversation. Automation where possible, right? And really building out that almost like a hybrid cybersecurity plan for each customer, right? Like there's some elements of fundamentals, and then there's kind of custom and strategic overlay on that. Is that right? And like, how do you, it still sounds like, there's still a bunch of technical stuff you're going to have to sell in a vCISO program. So how do you approach it? What are some of those things?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Is I think, and it goes back to what I was saying with Roddy. Is I think that the background in operations really serves to facilitate the way I think about this. So, being in operations, you understand how business needs to get done. So you actually have a good landscape of where the risk pieces are, and really what cybersecurity is. It's like a conduit for protection of those business processes. Mm-hmm. So, for perfect example about ICP, right now we're doing through Power PSA, we're delivering vCISO services directly for some of our MSP clients who said, "Yeah, we love that you help us build this program. We don't want to build a vCISO practice right now. Can you do that?" So yeah, we're doing it for them. One of our partners, kind of sent them the packages, and they said, and the ones for 50 and under, they're like, "That's really expensive. Do businesses under 50 really pay that?" And I'm like, "Well, yeah, absolutely." And the ones that don't want to pay it are the ones that I'm very honestly not interested in talking to, right? Yep. So example of that, there was another partner we're working with on an active deal. It's a startup, less than 10 people, same package, but the conversation went swimmingly, and it wasn't too expensive because we got brought into the conversation because the customer they wanted SOC 2. They're like, "We need to be SOC 2. And so the first question Tim, you talked about recently, what can't I sell you? So I said, "Why do you need SOC 2? So it became a business question really quickly. They want to get their business off the ground. Okay, well, we do this thing, and we serve these high priority clients or these, VIP clients. We want to build a custom website. We want to build custom processes for this, and we need SOC 2 to be secure." I said, "Well, okay, let's hang on a second, right? SOC 2 is going to cost you, $15,000 to $30,000, just a SOC 2 type 1. And they said, "No, we don't need a SOC 1. We need a SOC 2. I said, "Okay, let's have a conversation, explain the difference between SOC 2 type 1 and type 2. Got them understanding that. Now they're like, "Oh, so wait, we want to redo our SOC 1 every year. We got to pay that every year." I'm like, "Yeah, you got to pay that every year to get the SOC 1 audit done, or SOC 2 type 1 audit done, or go for your type 2. So I said, "Do we really need to do this?" And I always use the term, I say, what my job is to get you good enough security, right? So do we need to do this as start up? And then the conversation became business. They're like, "Yeah, you know what? Our initial clients are going to be relationship based. They're not going to be putting us through the paces." I said, "So here's what let's do. Why don't we put a good security program in place, get you good enough security, and then document what you're doing in a security statement, kind of our own mini SOC 2, and you can use that to start going after accounts." And I said, "We'll stack that. And as we stack clients and as we begin to get revenue and cash flow in the business, then we can start strategically thinking about maybe it's time to get the SOC 2 type 1 now, and then strategically going after accounts that are going to require that." But I said, let's not do that right now. Let's get you good enough security. Let's protect your assets. We even had discussions about their development. They said they wanted a custom website, and what they were talking about, "Guys, have you developed business processes? Have you developed scoping for this? Because what you're telling me, it's going to cost you $100K plus to build this, right? Did you think about maybe using Dynamics? And we can build that into the Microsoft stack, and you could do everything in Dynamics that you need for right now once you've told me this." "Oh yeah, that's a great idea. And we can protect it better," right? This is all outcome business discussion. How do we get you from here to there, get cash into the business, and start helping you build for the future? Security is almost a byproduct or an ancillary piece to that. And so when you start having conversations like that and you're an advisor, they walked away from that discussion saying, "Wow, we really feel educated that you solidified yourself as a trusted advisor," and they're not even a client yet, right? Yeah. So that's how you want to get into the relationship, is with the trusted advisor, the business outcome discussion, and security is just a conduit to keep those business processes protected, right?
Yeah. I can't tell you, Jesse, how many times we'd go into a business and they'd be like, "Here's what we need. We need this, this, and this."
Are you sure?
And like, so the best analogy I ever had was we're at Galactic, and we're sitting with our managers in charge of our compliance platform, and we're going through different discussions, and he's like, "Roddy, there's always an old saying, when does your client, when your client asks you for a 3/4 inch drill bit, do they really need, what they really need is a 3/4 inch hole? It's like they're asking you for something, but like, what's their outcome? Their outcome is a 3/4 inch hole, but they're asking for a 3/4 inch drill bit. Like those two things are disconnected. They don't have to. They don't have to be the same thing. Like logically, you could put this in place to get the outcome, but is there another way to get to that outcome? And that's the discussions that we have to have. We have to peel back a little bit from what's going on and say, well, what is it that you really want? Yeah. Where are we going? Right? Like where are we going to be at in 3, 5, 10 years? And how about building a process around there? Because if you're building a process or you're building a technology or you're building a new business unit and you're building it for like 1 year in the future, like you're gonna falter and you're gonna realize that in 3 years, 5 years that you can't make major changes because you built this rocky process, this rocky business practice, just trying to get it off the ground without any forethought.
Well, and it's the same thing as why when we were getting started with our security program, I think we made the same mistake pretty much every MSP in history has made selling cybersecurity, right? We got a bunch of tools, got this really cool security stack, went to sell it, and everyone said, so what? This is 2014. We don't even know what you're talking about. So we went back to the drawing board and said, okay, we have to include vCISO with everything we sell, because if there's no strategic alignment and vision for the program, it's just not going to work. And so exactly to your point, a client comes to you and says, I need managed detection and response. Okay, why do you need it? Okay, we're not just going to give you managed detection and response because we're not strategically thinking about what the holistic view of your organization is, right? And without that, you're just not going to be successful in the long term. Yeah, you might sell that MDR package to that one client, but you may have just stymied a certain other business process that you weren't aware of and you didn't take the time to dig in on. And you're going to be blamed for it at the end of the day.
Yeah. And that's why I tell our sales team, even at Sherwell, right? We've had a lot of discussions and like we'll have MSPs come to us and be like, hey, I need to start selling Copilot. I need Copilot licenses like right now. And I'm like, what's your business? What's your use case for these? And they're like, I need Copilot. And it's like, okay, like, let's talk about use cases. Let's talk about data governance. Let's open up. And I was having a discussion with a partner yesterday. And they're like, we were going through. So one of the things that I'm building, I was like, hey, here's the governance pieces and the security pieces you should put in place before you license your first Copilot user. He's like, man, this is stuff that you should be doing in Office 365 already. And I'm like, yeah, like use the selling point of Copilot to be like, hey, we need to put some precautions in place to make sure that we don't have data leakage because there's new concerns. It's the same concerns we've always had with governance in Office 365. It's just now you have an opportunity to sell a project that puts them in compliance, and then you still will probably get the Copilot licenses on top of that. And you're not going to get those weird calls at night because you have a client that understands it. You hopefully build some use cases around it so you can better protect those workflows and those business processes. Yeah. And the client is including you in their business decisions. Like it's a win across the board. Like, yes, I can go and add 20 licenses for Copilot, but let's have a broader discussion about it.
And hey, by the way, how rewarding is that to help your clients win in that way? You have those discussions, you are going to be invested in the right way in their success. And so you're going to make decisions out of that frame. And that's a whole relational piece that you're actually helping yourself do a better job, and protecting yourself from making decisions that are self-serving, right? So,
and again, to your point, if you walk in and all you're doing is saying like, I'm going to put an MDR, I'm going to put a SIM, I'm going to put a new firewall, and you're not telling them why, like you're selling them. You're selling them on a financial decision. What you need to be selling on is a value-driven decision. Like, what is the business deriving from this? And that's it's art, it's science. It's not salesy. I don't find like it's educational. So like, there's not a whole lot of good. There's not a whole lot of good MSP owners, right, who are technical, who know how to sell, but they can educate. We've all been educated. We've been through the education process. So yeah, we can turn around and educate as well. I think sales gets a bad name. Because of the traditional sales types where you're like, it's high pressure and everything else. You don't have to high pressure sales anyone. You just educate them and show that you care.
Yeah. If it's not a cold call, kind of don't know anything about the business. So, Jesse, like I said, that was a pretty masterful kind of like couple minutes that he talked about. Client comes in looking for a SOC 2. They don't know why they need a 3/8 inch hole, as you said. They don't know why they need a 3 inches. They're asking for a drill bit. They're asking for a nail gun, right? And then you just kind of drive that conversation forward. So, having that, and then even the education part, right? Like the same thing you said about Copilot. Like they're like, oh, great, they're coming to me with the tool. Like, now it's my turn. So let's flip this around. Yeah.
Yeah, and look, any I don't want to get in the middle of a license sale, right? But like at the same time, I want to empower the MSPs to think a little bit differently and take a bigger conversation to their client. Like, I always said, like, one of the goals I had in our MSP, right? And it's one of those, like, you read about it in a book type goal, and it's like, hey, in the balance sheet, when our client is writing down, like, where does our MSP enterprise data concepts, like, where do they fit in on the balance sheet? Like, put me with the people that sit at the table that make decisions for the business, help the decisions drive, help the business make business decisions, and not with the person who's like responsible for making sure like the walls get painted, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with painting the walls and making sure the flower bed looks nice. But like, I want to be in the professional service column, not the other side of the balance sheet. Yeah. And we had a term for it. Like, we don't want to be computer janitors anymore. Like, we want to be consultants. We want to be advisors. And
right.
It takes a whole lot of new way of thinking. Yeah. We definitely had, as our old one would say, we had a lot of change the tires while the bus is still running type decisions, and it's tough. I'll tell you, they had a lot of very hot EOS meetings in my years. Very, very hot meetings. But like, hey, at the end of the day, we were there for a reason, and everything worked out. But it's not for the faint of heart.
Yeah. So sales wise, I think you guys nailed that, right? In terms of that soft introduction, you've got some kind of foothold, like really leveraging either curiosity on something like a SOC 2. So you've got these customers ongoing now, which is great. Like, you sold them on some kind of security package, like they're on some kind of roadmap, some kind of compliance, even a compliance standard roadmap. Talk a little bit about, like, we talk about QBRs when we're talking about just kind of MSP, really technical services, but on the cybersecurity side, what are the things you're talking about in whatever that cadence is, like monthly, quarterly, weekly, and what are some of the metrics? Like, how are you measuring progress or some kind of, success?
So we were going through the QBR process, right? So quarterly business review, and they were absolutely terrible, right? Like, real horrendous. Who has? And I asked this question.
Tickets closed. Like,
tickets.
I kind of had a bad
closed.
Good,
response time. Yeah. Pictures of the family.
JP Morgan, 85 million, attacks defended a day, right? Like, you saw the stat. Yeah.
Every time I do this talk about risk management, because that's where this conversation is going to go. Is I say, how many people, and I'm talking to the room full of MSPs. In fact, I did a talk in Phoenix a few weeks ago, and I was like, how many people in here do a QBR? And 80% of the room raised their hands. I go, how many people think they suck? And like, I'm like, how many people have their clients call them and say, I can't wait to do the next QBR. That was fantastic. And then like 2 people raised their hand, and I was like, here's the problem, right? Like, what does your QBR talk about? Does it talk about outcomes? Does it talk about? I said, we had that same problem. Like, it was you get the whole. We would call the client, we'd talk with our point of contact, and be like, hey, we want to schedule your quarter business review, and then you're like, oh, let me talk to our secretary so they can schedule us, which is like same thing as telling me, like, you got to wash your hair that night and I'm not available to go out, right? Like, it's basically what you're telling me,
right?
Because if you can't schedule time on your calendar, like, look at it and tell me yes or no, like, you're just hamstringing me. So so we did was like, all right, flip it around. Like 5 minutes, we're gonna talk about what we did, and then the other part of the time we're gonna talk about, like, here's the risk that we've been looking at, here's the treatments we've been working on, here's the potential treatments for other risk, and here's the questions we're gonna ask. What's standing in the way of us treating these risks? Is it people? Is it money? Is it time? Are we willing to treat these risks or continue to treat these risks? What is the effects of not treating these risks? And yada yada, right? So all these questions are about the business. It's not about what we did. It's about what are we going to do moving forward, and how does this relate to your business? Like, so and through that, we'd ask questions like, do you plan on hiring people in the next few months, whatever. And you ask that question like, oh yeah, by the way, we're looking at buying a company, or we're buying, like, that's happened. I can tell you, if I had a nickel for every time that happened. I'd probably have at least 3 nickels, and it's not a lot of money, but it's a weird coincidence that I have those 3, right? Like, and you start having this conversation about them, and things open up. When you're having that conversation about you and what you can do, it's like it's not entertaining. It's not interesting to them, and the whole point of us going is for it to be about them. Yeah. So that was it. I mean, we talked. So we coined the term. We had the term QRR, quarterly risk review, and we were like, hey, we want to talk about the risks to your business objectives. And that conversation starts at the beginning, from the onboarding of like, what's your business objectives? What do we need to be looking out for? Why are you even calling us? Because apparently you reached out to us for a reason. What is it? And you have all these conversations pre-onboarding, and then you start to align your stack or your offering to those risks, and that's your risk treatment. So you're not selling a product, and you're not selling a stack, and you're not selling a tool. You're selling a risk treatment, and that is a whole different conversation to a business and a business owner, right? A business owner who's serious about their business. Let me add that, because there's some other gotchas to that, but like
Yeah, that's good. That's awesome, Roddy. Like, I love the way you kind of renamed it as well, which is specifically about risks and like specifically more about business outcomes than like QBR, which is like, how we doing? Tickets closed, right? Like,
hey, we went look at all the green lights and they're all blinking green still, no red ones. And you give a thumbs up, like, of course, like no one cares, right?
I made the dashboard. Of course, there aren't any yellows.
Or like, hey, FortiGate released the new 81G.
Yeah. Well, so it's funny, Tim, because you said, what KPIs resonate, and I'm like, no KPIs resonate.
Yeah. It's funny because the ones I mentioned, I think I had multiple presentations in the fall about this, and some of them were like shadow IT, right? Like, what the hell are my employees doing all day? Like, that kind of resonates, right? Like, it has to be even like our employees remote, or are they in the office? There's like little ones that like some of the tools produce that I think are somewhat interesting, but overall, like they, as you said, like most of the security acronyms don't even get those near some kind of dashboard. So
and of course I'm being hyperbolic there, right? I mean, but you want to, there needs to be 2 or 3 tops, right? And it needs to be trending. Like, risk is always a good one. At the risk of being trite, I'll say, you want a risk number, you want a trend line showing where are we compared to last month, where are we going, and why. The risk, it's only a barometer to say, are we better this month or this quarter than we were last? What's the reason? Can we accept that, or do we need to make pivots in what we're doing? And really all it is a jumping off point for discussion, right? That is the only reason for the risk, is to drive discussion and get into the stories. Like you said, are you planning any new acquisitions? Do you have any technology initiatives coming up? I mean, I just asked that question, and I got 3 major technology initiatives that are being planned by other business units in an organization. Well, we need to at least talk about that. And we need to make sure we're doing vendor risk management and vetting vendors and giving the business decisions. Again, that's another thing when you want to talk sales with a client, especially in ongoing relationships, is to be very blunt about, hey, what I'm trying to do here is I'm not trying to get you to buy something. And you don't have to say it that way, of course, that's a little on the nose. But what you say is, hey, what I'm here to do is to give you a clear and distilled view of decisions you need to make about risk. And then it's your job to say yes or no to those decisions based on what you now know and have clear understanding of. So if you don't want to do these controls and you want to accept that risk and take on that risk, that does not matter to me. That's okay. But my job is to give you the clear decision-making authority to say that I know what my risk is and I'm making an informed decision about it. And when you do that and you put onus on the business owners or the people that you're talking to about that, they tend to make better decisions because they know that at the end of the day, they're the one making the decision, and they can't transfer that risk off of themselves, right?
Yeah.
So
like knowledge is power, right? Like they let them make informed decisions, and that's where I think a lot of MSPs slip up, is they're trying to make decisions for their clients. Like you see it all the time, and like you can't, and like that's just the nature of being a technical person and being an engineer and being that person. Is like you have to fix it. It has to be fixed, right? And you can't. You can't. You just have to. Here's the information. Here's the plan I want to propose. Here's how much it's going to cost. Here's the outcome. It fits in. Like, Like sign the check or don't, like make the decision. But like we can't. We try to force them into a decision, and it's really like, here's, I'm gonna tell you what to do, and we're not giving them the why and the data to back it up. But to metrics, right? Like we would just track a simple metric, right? If we had a qualitative risk assessment and we were rating things on a point system, it was like whose line is it anywhere? Like points are made up, but it doesn't matter. Like we would just be like, all right, how many points was it last quarter? 30. We had 35 points of risk. Right? What is it this quarter? It's 32. Okay, well, we obviously reduced risk, and you trend that out. Like, hey, how are we doing on risk? What's and if we didn't have a risk treatment, or if we had something that was still out there, obviously if a new risk popped up, that risk would come up, or if things slot. But that was it. Like we had a very small metric, because again, who's going to sit there and read 8 metrics and understand it? Like it's a discussion to have, but we got to have something to trend off what we're doing, show that we're actually improving things. And that's it. It was one simple metric. How many points of risk do we still have?
And I've seen a lot of dashboards with MSPs, and they always should have some kind of analytics. Like, oh, when's the last time this guy logged in? If he's not logging in, like he's not coming back to look at something, right? So
and look, that's part of it. Like you got to have your own internal metrics to look at too, but don't overwhelm the clients with it.
That's
like,
right.
Give them, like as we used to say in our executive summaries when we create them at Galactic, and this is a shout out to Cody Kretzinger. Cody would say, "Big pictures, small words." Like that is like that's all executives want. They want pretty pictures or big pictures and small words, and that's what. And like, I never thought it would work, and it does. Like when MSP would sit down, and like if you sit down with a technical person, it's a different discussion. When you sit down with a business owner, like. Keep it short, keep it simple, keep it big picture, especially if you're sitting there with you got a whole C-suite, right? Like you don't want to bore them to death, but you want to keep it short, simple. They've got a tea time in an hour and they got to make it to the golf course. You don't want to be the one hamstringing. You want to give them even if they ask you a question like, hey, what's up? What's going on with MGM Grand? They got breached. They weren't having simple security practices, and that's it. That's how you end the discussion. Yeah. Now, if they want technical details, you can go into it, but like that's it. That's all they want to know. They don't care about the tech, Yeah,
I think it depends on the maturity of the customer, the type of organization you're dealing with, who you're having. Right, you might be talking with the IT director, and they in turn have to go around and report to the board. So you got to arm them with the right information to do that. It's a little bit more of a political dance, right? But helping organizations like that are a little bit bigger, a little bit more mature, start to risk register. That's another good KPI or metric, right? I can't tell you that there's been boards that I go in, I say, well, we'd really like to get our cyber risk register integrated with the business risk register. And you get kind of like blank, almost like deer in headlights stares, because they don't have a business risk register. And you're like, okay, well, that's fine. Like, again, typical IT person is to get frustrated with that. You say, okay, well, we just have to take a little bit more time and educate. Like you're being a business enabler. Hey, I'll help you get a business risk register going, right? It's not cyber, but I can give you a template and show you how to run it. And then all of a sudden they're talking business risk. They're prioritizing things about their business. And you were the one that spawned that. You're in an invaluable position right there.
Yeah. Yeah. And look, the best kudos you can ever get from a business is when you do a bunch of hard work with them, you get them on a good path, and then you sit down and watch the process. You watch them take on all the new processes and they run with it, and they're really streamlined and they're growing, and they look back and go, man, they don't know how we would do this 3 years ago, right? Like we were a completely different company. I can tell you, like implementing a risk strategy and telling a business like, hey, have you ever heard of a thing called EOS? And we would tie those two things together, where it's like, you have these issues with risk, but this is how you're going to talk about them. You can go through the EOS process. And like we had one company, they went from 150 employees to like 500 in like 2 years. Nice. And they were a health company, and they were like, dude, if we wouldn't had put those processes and that governance, that business governance, not even IT governance, but business governance.
Right.
Like we didn't even know we had issues, and they'd sit down and they were like, they would always call it their Festivus moment, right? Where it was the airing of grievances each week. Like, we got an airing of grievances, and like, we didn't know this was a problem. But like, because no one talked to one another. No one had that they were just going by gut and feel, and you had a leader at the top who was pushing everything forward, but like one guy couldn't do it anymore. So putting those processes in place and understanding the business of things, oh man, it's golden. Like I don't know what else to add to that, but it's I've seen what happens. Yeah, I'm sorry. I keep saying EOS. I didn't we have too many.
I'm throwing the acronym out to the.
I saw it in the chat. Like, there's too many TLAs, right? Three-letter acronyms out there. So yeah.
Yeah. No, I think the risk. Go ahead, Jesse. Before I go. Yeah.
No, go ahead, Tim. I think I'm going to ask the same thing you were. So go for it.
Yeah. No, I mean, just the. I get this question all the time. Like, what's the ROI in cybersecurity? And it's really it's in your risk management, right? And there's an ROI in risk management. Penny earned is a penny saved. Penny saved is a penny earned, right? Penny defended, a penny, not at risk, right? Like, so it's just like when you think about sales, like you lose a customer, you got to go sell two more, right? So it's like thinking about like risk. And I love how you guys both set it up, either using, I forget the acronym you use, Roddy, for instead of a QBR.
QRR, quarterly
QRR, quarterly risk review. And Jesse's using the risk registry, right? Like you're actively talking about like, business impact risks, right? And some things that will resonate, things that we'll want to talk about and come back and like revisit, or like, oh, I forgot we have this other problem. Like, as you said, every 90 days you're talking about that. So, yeah, no, that's good stuff. And I threw the acronym in the chat here. I think I did, but it ends up all over the place. So
yeah, well, it's interesting just to go back to that. Thinking about disarming the client by actively not selling them something, and that's not a tactic, right? But what it's
one of my favorites. Like, what am I not selling you? You something like you gain trust by that right away. If you're always pushing something and always closing, yeah, that's a problem.
But it's got to be real, right? It can't be like a tactic. Like, I'm not going to sell you something, but wow, I just sold you this, right? Yeah. It's like, no, I want to help you have good enough security for your risk tolerance, right? COO I was working with, arming. He's getting involved in the cybersecurity program because it's coming down from the top. He's got to go talk to the board about risk. We did some fair modeling for their monetary risk and put an ROI against some of the controls we're recommending again. And so one of them, third-party risk management. He goes, hey, this is really expensive. Do we need this? And so then he starts picking apart the fair modeling numbers. I'm like, here's the algorithm. Like, you can compute it. Like it's I said, risk is subjective at the end of the day. We're taking our best known data that we have and making an approximation for what we think. It's not saying that this is the exact dollar amount, but we want to say, again, trending. So I said, you could go pick apart the calculation and say, do I agree with it or not? But really what the thought is saying, okay, there is a level of risk, a higher level of risk. There is a tool that is going to mitigate that risk, this amount. And we believe that the approximate ROI on the spend versus the ALE risk reduction, annualized loss expectancy, is going to far outweigh the cost of the tool. Now, knowing that and knowing that the data is not perfect, you have to make a decision because we've armed you with the best data that you have. And you do not need to buy this, but I'm making the recommendation based on, I think it's a good buy on the ROI. But at the end of the day, it's your decision. So, and I'll leave it with you. And that was the end of the conversation. He's like, okay. So he's going to go think about it and make his decision, and I'm fine with it either way, right? So that's how it needs to be approached.
Yeah. No. And you start talking about mitigating those risks, like, or just avoiding them altogether, right? Like, I was going to write a snipey comment, like, I'm going to run my dentist's office on TikTok. Like, is there a problem with that, Jesse? Like, or like whatever. Think about crazy ideas that they're going to come up with. But yeah, I mean, it's getting into that, identifying the risks, doing your best to quantify them, right? It is subjective. They're not going to be to the penny, right? But so
it's an inductive exercise, right? Deductive means we have a set, and this is why we don't like these types of conversations as technical people. We are deductive thinkers. We like a binary set of logical rules that equal true or false at the end of a mathematical equation. Well, inductive is we take what we know as it comes at us, we build models, and we make approximations and best guesses based on the data we have currently. And we don't like that as IT people, right? And so we have to get comfortable with that.
Yeah, the lights either come on or off, right? There's no in between. So, but like in our world, you have to make some approximations, right? You have to say, like, I don't know, like no one wakes up in the morning and says, I think I'm going to be a victim of an incident today, right? Like nobody. So like
Right.
you don't know when it's going to happen. You have the data that's available to you. You have your experience in the field, and you lay it all out for your client. And if you put it in the hands of your client, when you put it in the hands of your client as a decision, like it becomes real to them when they understand it's their business, it's their baby, it's the bottom line. Like hopefully what you're saying, like either plants a seed in their heads so that maybe in a few months they'll come back to it and be like, yeah, I've heard same thing you've said 6 times and it's resonating with me now, or you are such a great person, you resonates with them right there and they sign, and you start that risk management process with them and those other services, right? Because it's not just about installing tools, it's about the governance piece as well from your MSP that you're doing with them.
Absolutely.
5 minutes left. Final thoughts here. We'll each go kind of once around the table here, and probably get out a couple minutes early. Maybe not.
I'll
go first.
My inner Dale Carnegie.
Roddy, yeah, you go second. I'm going to steal your QRR thing. I wish more MSPs would use that. And
that's good.
Even MSSPs for that matter, right? Like QRR, like whatever cybersecurity, however you're delivering it, like that's just a great way to frame it and like get that mindset going of like tying it back to business objectives. So Roddy, you're up.
If you want my hot take for the industry, I would say right now, stop being technology providers and start being risk managers who also offer technology solutions.
There you go.
Because that's the game's changing, and we can't just be the tech people anymore. We have to be consultative in what we're doing.
Definitely.
Yeah. So for me, it occurred to me as we were talking today that it's a bit of a duality, right? Like I started off saying, you got to be invested in the success of your client's business. You need to be a business partner with them, but then you can't care at the end of the day if they don't take your recommendations. So there's some dissonance there, right? But I think it's a tempered, balanced approach. Care about your clients enough to invest and make the right recommendations for them, and be smart enough and serene enough to understand that it's a journey and they need to make their own decisions and to come to their own conclusions and even sometimes make their own mistakes. And at the end of the day, it's your job to be their guide, to present them with the 2 options and let them make the choice.
All right.
Oh, you're unmuted, Tim.
I was looking at the calendar. I didn't want to put background noise. Who knows what pop up, but I totally agree. So really reframing the risk conversation here will definitely be helpful, accretive to your, actually being a trusted advisor and selling more of whatever you're selling, and making money doing it. So awesome show, Roddy. Fantastic insights.
Great stuff, man.
Glad you decided to come on. And next week we are talking about CISO services to some degree. Eric Stover. So this will be right up Jesse's alley next week.
This is based on a post I put out a while ago and got everyone all riled up. So we'll save that for next week.
Sharpen your pitchforks, Bill.
Yeah, that's right. Come with your spiciest comments for the section next week.
Awesome. I'm loving a little controversy. So Tim should be back next week, but enjoy the weekend and thanks for stopping in. Thanks, guys.
Have a good one. Thank you.
Yeah, see you, everybody.